Okay, gotta get out in front of the boat. Come on, baby. That's a good cast. Right there. Come on. Come on. There it is! Yes! Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Nice. Come on. It's a lot of fun catching fish on the California Delta on a spinning rod. Let's talk about it. I'll give you some ideas on what I'm doing with spinning rods out here, how to set them up, and what baits to fish on them. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching In Deep on the Delta. Today I'd like to talk about fishing spinning rods, and I'd like to really focus in when it comes to fishing spinning rods on power fisheries. My home water is here on the California Delta, and it's known as kind of a tough guy fishery. Everybody comes out here and they're looking for these big Florida bass that are fighting current all the time. It's a tidal fishery, so they're fighting current, they're strong, they live in tight to cover, and it's known as a power fishery. Everybody out here is frogging, they're punching, they're flipping, they're using 65 to 80 pound braid, and it's just, it's a tough guy place. Years and years ago, a lot of the old Delta rats out here, they all had spinning rods, but they very seldom ever fished a spinning rod on the Delta. They'd stay under deck, and every now and then one would come out and, somebody would get made fun of because they were using a ferry one. There's one, yes. Oh, all right, nothing like catching topwater fish on a spinning rod. Let's talk about it. Now the rod that I'll be talking about today, this is a Shimano Curado. It's a 7'2" medium heavy, rated for I think up to 15 pound test line and a 3/8 of an ounce weight. You can throw all that stuff out the window when it comes to line ratings and weight ratings. You just have to go into a shop or talk to somebody that owns one and says, yes, you can do this, this, and this on this rod, but don't try this. And that goes for bait casters too. Spinning rods will never take the place of bait casters. You're not going to flip with them, you're not going to punch with them, you're not going to throw frogs with them. They're not designed for that. What I have found with this 7'2" Curado, it is a tough rod. Now it's got quite a bit of tip. I mean, it's not a real soft rod for a spinning rod. It's got quite a bit of tip, but when you get down into this section here, you can really put some torque on fish. And that's what is important to know with these newer rods, especially the carbon fiber rods. You get some of these stealth sticks, cashin rods, some of the rods that they're calling inshore rods. They're meant to fight big fish. So when you hook up on them 10 years ago, you wouldn't want to really flex those rods too much because they had a tendency to pop in your hands. I've put all kind of pressure on my spinning rods, and I haven't broken a spinning rod unless it's in a fan or in a door probably in 10 years. So I've got the 7'2" rod here, and I will say if I'm fishing spinning rods and I want power, I'm not going to go under 7 feet. And number one, to me, smaller, shorter spinning rods are not as accurate when it comes to being able to cast them, and the longer rods have a little more reach when you set the hook. So the longer the rod, the more radius you have to actually move a bait and set a bait, set hooks on a bait. So with this rod, I have a 2500. This is a Vanguard, Shimano Vanguard, but a 2500 reel generally goes nice with a 7'2" to 7'6" spinning rod. So I'm fishing either 30 or 40 pound braid line on this. I'll put anywhere from a 3 to 6 foot mono leader attached to the end of my braided line. I use a Crazy Alberto knot to tie braid to the mono, and then generally on my baits I'm tying a Palomar knot. So let's talk about the baits that we fish on this guy. The first thing we'll talk about topwaters. Spinning rods are absolutely a blast to fish with topwaters. Generally for topwaters, I'll only use about 3 feet of mono leader, and that leader will go anywhere from about I'll say 10 to maybe 14 pound test. This is a nice little size of popper to throw on spinning rods, and this happens to be a Rico. Another one that you could throw on a spinning rod is a baby spook. This rod will walk spooks very easily. There's several sizes of whopper plopper that a lot of people don't fish. This is the little, I think it's called the 90. A spinning rod throws the 90 really nice. And if you guys haven't checked out some of the river to see smaller whopper ploppers, you know, they make, I think, 5 sizes of these, and the smaller sizes can all be thrown on spinning rods, and they do very well, and they're a lot of fun to catch fish with on these topwaters. Another thing that you could throw is just a plain and simple a fluke. I like to nose hook them, just a single weightless hook, a little mosquito hook, nose hook fluke. For a fluke, I like to use 4 or 5 feet of leader, and I'll go down anywhere from about, I may go down to 6 pound test in the wintertime, but generally about 8 to 10 pound test leader onto that 40 pound. Another great bait that you can throw on a spinning rod is the Vision 110 jerk bait. I like to use this with 8 or 10 pound leader, and I'll go about 4 feet of leader. Now you have to remember, we're talking about sizing down your leader on these rods a lot of times, and a lot of guys are afraid that they're going to bust the leader on a hook set. Well, with the 7'2" to 7'4" spinning rod and a soft tip, it's really hard to even snap 8 pound test line. Where you're going to hurt yourself a lot of times if you're not changing out your knots, you're not changing your leaders, you got a bad spot in the leader, or you've got a knot that gives out. But just setting hook on something, you're not going to break 8 or 10 pound test very seldom with a spinning rod. Where you usually lose the fish is if you get a 5, 6, 7 pound fish and you got the rod loaded up and it's bending down here in the midsection of the rod and you're really putting pressure on it. That's when you're either going to pull a hook or that fish is going to jump or something, and when you have maximum pressure, you can break 6, 8 pound test line. 10, 12, 14 pound test, I rarely ever break it off with a spinning rod. Now, I do lose some big fish if I'm fishing that thing too close to cover and the fish turns around and it tries to get into the tules or some type of vegetation, and I've just got that thing pinned in there. It doesn't have the pulling power to turn a big fish's head like I'll say I've got a horny toad on this guy here. This is an old NRX rod, and it's a medium heavy 7'2" rod that I generally fish with 50 or 60 pound braid. This rod here, I can take that fish and turn him around. That's not going to happen with the spinning rod. But the spinning rod allows me to fish lots of different baits that I can't fish on the bigger, heavier rods. So the other thing that's really cool are these mini crankbaits that have been coming out. There's a ton of them. These are only about, they're probably an inch and a half long. Small baits like this work very well on a spinning rod, and again, 8 to 10 pound test is what you want to throw these smaller crankbaits on. They'll get down to the desired depth and they'll work down there for you, but just a lot of fun to throw on a spinning rod. And I don't even want to talk about drop shots. You guys know that that's spinning rods were made for drop shots. We're not even going to talk about that. Continue throwing your drop shots on them. You can also throw, I like throwing robo worms on them, or smaller finesse worms with a very light T-rig, or the rig that I talk about. Some people call it a split shot rig, or a modified Carolina rig, where I can either peg my sinker down to the worm, or maybe use it kind of with bobber stops, pulling it up the weight up the line, use it kind of as a modified Carolina rig. Works really well with spinning rods. The other thing is fishing paddle tail swim baits, and this is a 4.8 Kitech. You guys know what a Kitech is. Most of the Kitechs and paddle tail swim baits that I fish with are the 2.8, 3.2, the ones that are under 3 inches long. I'll just use a standard swim bait jig head, anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 ounce, pretty standard on that. But you can also use little flashy swimmers. This is a flashy swimmer made by Owner. You can put the small Kitex on this. This is a underspin by Mr. B's Lure Company. I think this is called he calls it the Deep Throat. You can put a 3.2 on this, and it's a very good size. This is a little bigger head than I would be using, but 1/4 ounce is fine to throw on these spinning rods. For you guys that are out here fishing the Delta, there's just a number of advantages to fishing a spinning rod. A lot of times, especially if you're fishing jerk baits, man, my hands just get so tired if I'm fishing jerk baits or frogs or punching all day. Picking up a spinning rod and just having a little lighter rod and a little different grip helps with the fatigue if you're fishing, long days or multiple days in a row. So, they're lighter, they're fun to fish, they're just fun to catch fish on. And don't be afraid to stick these fish and put some power on them. If you break them, most of these rods have warranties. You can go ahead and pick up another rod if you like that rod, and don't be so brutal on the next one. But don't be afraid to, don't baby these rods. Set hook on fish and fight them hard and just have a good time. And with that, I'll just say, give these things a try. So thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, stay tuned. I'll talk with Rob from the Bass Hole, and he'll have some suggestions on some of his favorite tough guy power rods for fishing here on the Delta, Clear Lake, and other fisheries that you guys may be wanting to fight a big fish on light gear with. So thanks for watching, and we will see you on the water. Good luck.